Okay, in this video, we are going to be taking a look at asserting a timeout. So we want to look at a class under test, and that method we're going to say should run in a certain period of time. Now, I do want to preempt this by saying you do need to be careful when you're doing this because your local system versus the CI system could have very, very different timings. I've seen it more than once where you're running on a laptop, you're running by yourself on your laptop, and it runs pretty quick. And then you commit it to the laptop timings, and then you move it up to a busy CI server where you may not be getting the same CPU bandwidth, and your timings are all off. So just a word of caution when you're doing these type of timeouts. But this is a very important tool when it comes to testing to make sure you haven't introduced a performance problem. Now you can see on the screen here, I have the JUnit Java doc up, and there's two assertions we're going to be looking at. One is assert timeout, and basically this is going to go ahead and run as long as it takes, and then once that process completes, it's going to do an assertion of the timeout to see if the time was exceeded. Now, assert timeout preemptively, when you give it a duration, what's going to happen is once that duration gets exceeded, then it's going to terminate your test early. Now, another important distinction is when you are doing just the regular assert timeout, you are going to be running in the same thread. When you're doing assert timeout preemptively, the executable, the test method is going to be running in a different thread. And so basically JUnit is going to spawn a thread, run that test in that thread, and if it takes too long, it's going to kill that thread early. So very, very important distinction on how these work. They both have their use cases. Honestly, I rarely use these, but there's definitely use cases where you do use these. So you do need to be aware of it when you do need to test performance. This is a very handy tool. So let's go over and take a quick look at an example here. I'm going to jump over to IntelliJ now. Okay, let's go ahead and set up a couple new test methods. So we'll go ahead like so, and what we can do is say assert timeout. So we can do duration of mils, and we'll say 100 milliseconds. And what we can do is come in here and toss him a little lambda. Now I'm going to go ahead and copy this guy. So, and in this case, I'm going to do assert timeout. Preemptively. And what we're going to see is that they run faster. Let's do this little experiment. And we'll do this here as well. And what I expect is that we won't see this output on the screen. I'm just going to put a random number in there so we can distinguish the two messages. So let's go ahead and run these. And now you can see the assert timeout. We do get the console output of I got here. Now let's take a look at that, and we don't have that output. And you can also see here the test timeout that ran for 2 seconds and a few milliseconds. So you can see here in this value here, the 200 milliseconds. And then in the preemptive one, you can see that it took 117 milliseconds. So what I can do is I can increase this to 5,000. Let's increase both of them to 5,000, which would be 5 seconds. And I'm just going to rerun the failed test. We're going to see them fail again. And you can see how long that first one took. So that ran a full 5 seconds because it's going to run in a single thread. So it's running in the same thread. And JUnit is just going to pause and wait for it. Now the other one is running on a separate thread. Even though I told it to sleep for 5 seconds, it went into that wait state. You can still see that the timing of that, the preemptive one, got canceled out early by JUnit. So what we can do is also, before I check this in, remember we have disabled. And I'm just going to disable both of these tests like so. It's a bad habit to check in failing test. At least typically it is. So I'm going to go ahead and run all the tests again. And you can see now these two are grayed out because I've disabled the test. So I will check this into GitHub. And if you want to check out the code, just comment out this disabled annotation and it'll run normally.